Hello, thank you very much for taking the time to view this short presentation. My name is Seamus Allison and I represent a research team based in Nottingham. Over the last few years, Nottingham City Council and Nottingham Business School have been working together on a number of projects to evaluate cycling provision in the city. This particular presentation looks at one piece of that evaluation, particularly regarding the perceptions of what is called the Western Cycle Corridor, which is a new piece of cycling infrastructure in the city of Nottingham. Nottingham City Council wanted to better understand how users of the infrastructure felt about it and how things could be improved from their point of view. Now, Nottingham City Council has one of the highest cycling spends per head of population amongst English local authorities, although its cycling share of travel to work is really quite modest at 4.5%. Nottingham is quite an ambitious city though, and is seeking to be carbon neutral by 2020. So policymakers see the encouragement of cycling as a key element in helping the city achieve that ambitious target. To give a little bit of background, Nottingham City Council were already involved in an on-street questionnaire, a multi-item on-street questionnaire. Nottingham Business School approached the City Council and there was an agreement that the business school could be part of this research project, and that in addition to the standard questions that the City Council had already used for this survey, they were similar to previous surveys, there would be a small number of additional questions suggested by Nottingham Business School. The questionnaire was then deployed along the Western Cycle Corridor, and data was collected from a number of locations along the corridor, in addition to other sources such as online, via cycling organisations in shops and so on. There were three pieces of analysis conducted on the data. The first was to look at the user segments that could be identified. The second was to identify the modus of those who were cycling using quantitative data. And finally, we looked at the themes emerging from the verbatim comments that respondents made while completing the questionnaire. This presentation addresses that first item, the segments that were identified. It may be worth giving a little bit of background regarding segmentation. The research team at Nottingham Business School is comprised of marketers, and segmentation is a very common technique used by marketing practitioners. It helps us take a mass market and break it down into smaller, distinct groups of people that may have common characteristics, similar needs, and who may respond to marketing interventions in a similar way. By breaking a market down like this, it allows for much more efficient and focused targeting, and allows for the better use of what may often be limited resources. Segmentation is recommended as part of the social marketing endeavour, as it helps marketers and practitioners, those responsible for implementing social marketing policy, helps them identify and generate greater insight into the target groups. Cycling, in the context of cycling, segmentation has been applied before, but it would be a bit of a stretch to say it's a very common application, although there are some really interesting applications of it. Some examples are there on the slide. We believe that using segmentation can be a very effective approach for local authorities to help them gain better understanding of the user groups and target their interventions more effectively. So just to go through the segmentation process that we followed, The survey was administered by Nottingham City Council along the Western Corridor, and when the research team at MBS saw the data and started to crunch the data, we thought it might be quite useful to identify users who had started to cycle or who have started to cycle more since the opening of the Western Cycle Corridor. They could represent very important target groups, and they're the people who are most likely to be positively disposed to behavior change messages. So we thought it might be useful to understand them better. The team conducted cross-tabulation analysis using the demographic questions, and we cross-tabbed those against the non-demographic questions, and we employed SPSS in order to do that. As a result of that initial analysis, there were 3 key user types who seemed to be much more likely to have started to cycle more since the new infrastructure. And we developed an initial profile of those 3 types of users based purely on NCC's questionnaire. What we then did, we took a number of key data points for each of those segments, things such as age, gender, educational background, those sorts of the journey times and journey distances, and we mapped those against the Acorn Consumer Classifications. The Acorn Classifications is a geodemographic segmentation of all of the UK households. It divides 25 odd million households into 6 categories. Within those 6 categories, 18 groups, then broken down further into 62 types, defined by a range of socio-demographic, attitudinal, behavioural characteristics. Acorn draws on a very wide range of data in order to produce these segments. The mapping of those initial segment groups that we got from NCC's data allowed us to create a far richer persona of the 3 types of users, and that was further backed up by the verbatim comments from the respondents. Now, the approach that we took, the mapping of the hard data from NCC across to Acorn, is highly subjective in nature, and due caution needs to be exercised. We took the segments, the resulting segments, and we presented them to people who could claim to have some knowledge of the different types of cycling types in Nottingham City, and they kind of passed those sense checks. But it must be remembered that this is highly subjective, that the user profiles are composites. They're not real people as such, so they represent a range of people. It's possible that characteristics were overemphasized in that subjective mapping process. It's possible that we missed some important characteristics, but we feel that overall this idea of taking the hard data and mapping it against that huge database represented by Acorn represented an opportunity to provide a far richer segmentation than perhaps has been done before. Another word of caution regarding these segments is that as part of the ethics approval process at Nottingham Business School, we agreed not to take certain data from the questionnaire, postcodes, for example, anything that might identify an address or the individual, and also ethnicity data. So we didn't take that data. So we have made no claims or not in any way tried to represent the ethnicity of the 3 segments. So we've used head and shoulder silhouettes rather than photographs, which might be more likely to be the case in practitioner marketing. The other thing to bear in mind is that the Western Cycle Corridor runs by a number of large employers such as the University of Nottingham, Queen's Medical Centre, Capital One, Boots, and those employers represent some of the most highly educated people in Nottingham. So these three user profiles cannot be thought of as representing typical user profiles of the more general population in Nottingham. So again, a certain amount of caution needs to be applied there. Our first segment is Jordan. I'm not going to go read through all the detail on this. You could stop the presentation and review it. But very briefly, Jordan is male. He's 18 to 25. He's single or in a relationship. He's either a recent graduate or maybe studying a master's, and he lives pretty much in the city centre or the inner suburbs of Nottingham. He cycles for convenience and to save money, and because it's quick. It's a quick form of transport for him. The more richer description for Jordan you can see by reviewing the other elements in the boxes there. The second segment is Sarah. Sarah is 35 to 54. It's quite a large range there. She's a married female and lives in the inner or outer suburbs of Nottingham, likely to have a family comprising 2 to 3 children. And Sarah finds cycling convenient for short journeys, but she cycles to increase her fitness levels. That's her main motivation. The creation of purpose-built cycle lanes was a strong motivator for Sarah. That was a strong trigger to help her start cycling. Her cycling sets her apart from her peers. So this isn't something that is shared by many of the other people in her neighbourhood or who she works with. Richard was the third segment. Richard is 45 to 54. He's a married male. He lives in the outer suburbs or the satellite towns and villages. He's likely to have 2 older children. They may be still living at home, or they may be recently independent. Richard cycles for fitness levels. He puts in extra effort, and of the 3 segments, he's the one who is likely to cycle the greater distances. Richard's friends and colleagues are also likely to be cyclists, so his cycling doesn't set him apart in any particular way. Richard is educated to master's or doctorate level and earns well over the average UK earnings. So just to round this up, the 3 segment types have already been shared with the senior management team at Nottingham City Council and the Greater Nottingham Cycle Development Group. And the management at the City Council felt that these segments, with the due caution applied, provided a level of insight that had not previously been available. So the intention is to apply this technique to further evaluation that the research team at Nottingham Business School will be conducting in partnership with the City Council. The insights and the techniques and so forth gained from the analysis, we plan to share that with other local authority practitioners via conferences, publications and so on. In fact, that process has already happened following some meetings we've had with practitioners from other local authorities. And lastly, the 3 segments and the methods that we use to develop the 3 segments have proved to be very useful teaching materials, and we have used these on master's and second year undergrad programs to help students gain a better understanding of that practical application of segmentation, and to help them see that it's not just some kind of abstract concept. And there are references, and thank you very much for taking the time to go through this presentation.